let's check our sound. Have the right audio set up. Recording looks good. Can I hear the thing and the thing? Turn on the headphones. Alright, sounds good. Hello, friends. Sorry, I'm a little sniffly today. Definitely pushed pretty hard during Origins. Got back on Sunday. I've still been pretty much sleeping and recovering afterwards because got a little bit of the con crud here. A little sniffly. A little sniffly and sleepy. Alright, do a quick post about this and then figure out what we want to do for the day. We want to design. Quick sniffly design stream. Yay. Game design daily. Oh, so hope everyone's having. Hi, Senior Bob. Bob. It's gonna be weird for me to get back to the real pronunciation of that. Hope you had a good trip home and didn't catch the sniffles like I did. Yes, I just got back from Origins. For these of you who don't know, it's a board game convention in Columbus, Ohio. One of the biggest tabletop only cons, second only to Gen Con. So for board game specific cons in the US, Gen Con, Origins, and now PAX Unplugged, I think are the biggest ones. A lot of conventions will be video games, comics, anime, kind of a mix of things, but Origins is very much board tabletop game only. My first time going to Origins, and it was a great show. Tons of designers, publishers. As an unpub room, you can show off your unfinished designs to general population. And I think my favorite part of the show is just meeting up with designers pretty much anywhere and everywhere and jamming on games. So it's pretty much most of what I did was just like plop down on a table and break out a design, and there'd just be other tabletop designers there ready to give you feedback. Give my own feedback to some games. And then just a lot of networking, chatting, being able to connect with people who I might have met online, chat about design and all the projects people are working on, get a feel for where the industry is at right now. So you might have heard a little bit about upcoming tariffs on products, games being manufactured in China, which is where most of the tabletop games are manufactured, along with rising paper costs. And no one was really talking about that specifically at the show, but talking to a lot of the publishers, there's definitely a little bit of belt tightening going on. And I think publishers who are looking for designs from people are being a little more particular about the designs that they're going to pick up on. So yeah. Senior Bob says, I don't think I've actually had con crud. I must not be trying hard enough. Or just taking care of yourself. I think there's just so many people to talk to, so many things to see. Didn't get as much sleep as I could have. I also just travel sometimes. I think it's rolling the dice when you're traveling, going through airports, crammed in rooms with a lot of people. I don't usually get con crud, but here we are. I think And there's the thing about taking care of yourself, whether you're making games, like trying to break into some creative field, or even just spending a lot of time on a hobby. Like on the weeks leading up to Origins, I was also pushing myself pretty hard and not getting a lot of rest. So it's the kind of thing just be aware of. Taking care of yourself is important, even if you're really excited about all the things that you're working on. Got to show off a couple of the designs we've been talking about here on stream. Showed around Split the Loot a little bit. That was pretty cool. Been on Artichokes, doing the final testing on that. Showed that off to some people who enjoyed it, so that was fun. And then what to eat after the apocalypse. I tested it a little bit and very quickly realized that I needed some more stuff, like some more thoughts on exactly where I want the game to go. I think it's going to end up being more narrative. So for those of you who haven't seen the game yet, I haven't been talking about it too much, but it's this idea that you're going across the post-apocalyptic landscape, trying to get to the promised land, and over time, like, you have to eat food to survive, but the food is going to give you a variety of conditions, and you're trying to balance the state of your group of people, the conditions with the various locations that you visit. So I've been pushing design-wise for a while to make it be pretty mechanical. So I'd have locations, you would draft items, you choose to eat those items, and then you would get to a shrine where they would, you'd have to pass a test, basically, for whether you'd had enough, like, radioactive deaths, or that kind of thing. My feedback from playtesters was, well, one of them, because you were trying to have a certain number of deaths, they're like, well, why would I feed my people? Why wouldn't I just, like, keep letting them die? And that was definitely not my intention with the game. So it made me pull back a little bit and think what exactly I was trying to achieve, which I think is a good, important thing when you're working on a design. Some things are a lot more mechanical, so looking at Abandoned Artichokes, it's got cool abilities, you have interactions, where a lot of the game is about what the other players are doing, what cards come up. So for a game that's lighter and a little more focused on a single mechanic, you don't necessarily have to worry too much about the story and the experience of the game. Or the experience can be very linear. So for Abandoned Artichokes, the experience is one of, gotcha, aha. Like, draw your 5 cards at the end of your turn, like, no, I didn't get it, or yes, I drew a hand of no artichokes. So it's a lot of tactical, like, in the moment intensity of emotion. Whereas with something like what to eat after the apocalypse, this was the idea. I'm very excited about the flavor of this game and the idea that the tension between having to eat these items that you're picking up and then not knowing whether this is going to kill you, basically. It's pretty... if you think about it, it's a pretty intense, emotional thing, and what I'm trying to capture in the game is this intensity of emotion where it's a little like Russian roulette, right? Everything, like, this absolute tension between, like, am I gonna starve, or am I gonna take the risk of eating this thing, which may be perfectly fine, but may not be perfectly fine. And I think that's interesting, intense experience to capture in a tabletop game. but I have to keep coming back, making custom dice, rolling them, getting a little bit of the fun and silliness in there, I think is cool, and there's a lot of stuff to play around with there. Little haunches of meat. And I think too, what I like about it compared to other post-apocalyptic games that I've seen or played is, I guess, Don't Starve. I like that you have the food decomposing over time, so I think it does capture this feeling a little bit of like everything is going wrong all the time. You just have to try and mitigate the things that are happening. And I think it can be, because food is such a visceral thing and something that we all have experience with, it can be a very intense experience to play around with. My little ping pong paddle here, it's meat. Or like a plant. Like a root vegetable. Like a carrot. And I've read about survival books, and always used to be fascinated by foraging. This idea that you can, the people, our ancestors did survive by digging up plants and surviving off of things that they found in the wild. And now that our food is so safe, most of us, at least in certain parts of the US, do have the luxury of going to the grocery store and having confidence that our food is safe and will feed us, and we don't have to worry about it. So it's almost a very meta level thing of taking that concept back, like the danger that food used to possess. And in the future, if some disaster were to befall, having to go through and come back to core basic survival from what you can find to eat on the ground, and having to live off that. I think there's a lot of cool ideas to play around with there. So the trick is to mechanize it. Senior Bob says, the Scout's Guide to Surviving the Apocalypse. I'm going to write that down because I actually really like that. Because they have all these cool books and things about surviving in the wilderness, or even free, I forget there's a term for it, but there's people who urban foraging, perhaps, go to, not necessarily out in the wilderness, but look in cities and more urban areas for things that you eat. Because there are a lot of things around us that are edible that we don't necessarily know about. Even like dandelions, I think, is a great example. The dandelion, the greens, they're very bitter, and most people would say they don't taste good, and you definitely have to prepare them in a certain way for them to either eat them very, very young, or do a lot of preparation to make them palatable. But they're good. They have a lot of nutrients in them. The dandelion flowers themselves, I think you can eat them, and I know for sure that you can make wine out of them. So you can make dandelion wine and have this really cool, interesting, floral sort of a flavor. And this is what people used to do, right? Just take things, make use of all the plants and parts and things. Survival used to be a lot more difficult than it is today. So yeah, those are the survival experience. Those are my thoughts on what to eat after the apocalypse, and thoughts about gamifying survival. And I think what's important, the important takeaway from this is there's a lot of really fascinating, intense experiences in life, right? That we don't necessarily, there aren't games that have been made about them. I think a lot of games I work on, I've seen other people work on, it's more lighter, thematically lighter, I would say, and just trying to make something fun, talking about like cooking different types of food, about popcorn, or eating all sorts of different sushi rolls, donuts. But I'm definitely interested in trying to capture a more diverse array of experiences. And for this game in particular, it's like, what can we do to make it feel like capture not only the mechanical strategy of moving my pieces, moving my characters, trying to make strategic decisions within the scope of the game, and then also capturing an experience of that's different than what a lot of games capture. And I think right now people and publishers are looking for things that are a little more different, a little out there. You know, we have so many games, so many good games that capture very mechanical ways of looking at the world. And right now I'm interested in exploring some of those ideas of how to capture experience. Hello, John Onward. Sorry I'm a little sniffly today. Probably not going to be hanging out for the full length of the stream because I'm processing my con crud, but I did want to pop on and say hi to everyone. Game Biologist says, you haven't had fun until you've taken a kid who's never eaten anything that didn't come from a store out to a local park and started eating berries off of trees and shrubs. They have to weigh the risk of bird poops against the lure of raspberries and mulberries. Oh my gosh, yeah. I was lucky, I would say, to grow up. We had a few acres in the first house that I lived in as a child, and we had briars, so raspberries and blackberry bushes, actually on our property. And my mom was born in Norway, so she very much, and her family grew up on a farm too, so she instilled in us this understanding and knowledge of where food comes from, and the joys of being able to discover food in nature and the dangers that come along with that, and having to be careful and gain the knowledge, that survival knowledge. So which berries are the right ones to eat? You know, when are they ready to eat? Which plants or mushrooms in particular, like that is still a very intense and scary thing. Mushrooms can be very dangerous. I would definitely not suggest harvesting them unless you have someone very knowledgeable who you can learn from. And even then, you know, it's a risk of this delicious chanterelle mushroom that grows in the forest that's like $20 a pound. If you buy it in the store, you can pick them for free. But are you accidentally going to eat a jack-o'-lantern mushroom or something that can put you in the hospital? So there's a lot to think about with food. And just this like fascinating dichotomy of how safe most of the food we eat is, and how much danger there can be. Safety and danger, right? That interesting dichotomy. Oh my gosh, drawn onward. Mushroom eating push your luck game. Seems dark. I know, right? Well, what to eat after the apocalypse is pretty dark. I would say it's weird, like, because I've been approaching the game from a pretty lighthearted stance, but just showing it to some people and they're like, this, you've mechanized it so that I have a pile of food here and I'm not feeding it to my people. Like, that seems kind of dark. Like, okay, yeah, I should rebalance the mechanics for that to get it back to where I want it to be. Oh man, yeah. I'm still thinking about that mushroom eating push your luck game. It's like, are you, have you survived here? Or even like adding mushrooms to what to eat after the apocalypse could be Oh my gosh. Abandon all mushrooms. I love it. Yeah, and that would be the whole game there is just like you have your hand of mushrooms, you just set your cards down and walk away from the table. You're like, this is not a game that I want to play. Alright. So yeah, that's what I've been working on. As far as the sequel to Abandon All Artichokes, clearly, right? We go from a world of grocery store friendly fruits and vegetables to I'd be kind of nervous about actually encouraging people or kids to eat mushrooms. Like, don't eat that. Oh my gosh, it's so scary. The thought they're just there, right? Like, just crazy how this. And I like to. So there's a lot of stuff in nature, things that you shouldn't eat, things that can be harmful for you. I don't like to take a super, like, don't go out there at all because there's dangerous things that could kill you. I don't want to have that attitude, but mushrooms in particular, I worry about like touching them, touching it and then getting the poison on your fingers. John Romer says that is a fair point, but you're abandoning them. Weird issues here, right? Yeah, so maybe it's an educational game of not eating any mushrooms. It's like, here's a hand of mushrooms, which one should I eat? And then you win the game by just putting all your cards down. So like, I don't eat any of the mushrooms. Like, yay, you didn't die. Yeah, so as far as the working on designs today, probably not going to hang out for too long because I'm very loopy right now, and I imagine that my words are coming across kind of strangely because I've slept for like 18 it's like, what is a lot of hours for like the last 2 days? I slept for like 14 hours today, and then I woke up, I'm like, I gotta do this stream. So apologies for the more loopy than usual. Don't eat toads for the same reason. Don't lick toads, right? Wasn't that something that the kids would do? Like, lick the toads for hallucinogenic purposes? Don't actually do that, kids. Don't do this at home. Oh my gosh. That'd be a funny thing. Don't do this at home. Game all about eating mushrooms and licking toads. Do this at home. Or is that what it is? Don't do this. Yeah. Don't do this at home, kids. About eating random mushrooms and licking toads. Delicious, delicious toads. Wait. And eating bugs too. Eating random mushrooms and licking toads. Eating random bugs. For some entertainment during the apocalypse, you can lick a toad. Add mushrooms. Yeah, I could put that. Add toad licking to the game to help you achieve. So right now I have it set up so you're going to every leg of the journey you're going to stop off at a shrine, and they're going to basically conferring with the deities there to see if you passed the test. So maybe the toad licking could be a part of that, to go into a meditative state. So you can transcend and connect with the deities. Because you need to have entertainment. I mean, if you're in this place and you're just dealing with the horrors of the post-apocalyptic world, you need some ways to kick back. I also think it's an interesting avenue to explore, because I think a lot of post-apocalyptic games and even like traveling games, not necessarily post-apocalyptic, but you might be historical as well. We are moving across the countryside, interacting with different items. I think a lot of them trend towards fighting and war. What I think is really cool about this concept is it's not about, you're not really in a position to be fighting with people. Like, you're saving every last ounce of your strength to just live and to survive. Don't do this at home. Mushrooms and toads. John Honor says, Emma, I haven't listened to the podcast yet, but whose idea was it to get Jerome of Splatter fame on the Ludology podcast? The Last Garden was set in the apocalypse, if I recall. The one about robots gardening. Jerome, that was before that I got onto Ludology, so it was actually pretty intense for my first week recording Ludology. I think we did 3 or 4 episodes, because especially it's con season and trying to get people in the right place at the right time for recording. We did a lot of episodes, all at the same time. And so yeah, I basically got into the Ludology Slack, and it was like, okay, here's a bunch of guests that we're talking to. I think Gil and Jeff and me going forward now are always keeping an eye out for people who would be interesting guests, and being able to talk to Jerome about the Splatter games, having played Food Chain Magnate, and it being this very interesting type of game and very evocative, something people know, and getting the feel behind those designs is pretty cool. The Last Garden was set after the apocalypse. If you've seen the box art for that game, there's a picture of a woman, I'm pretty sure, and then the gardens, but if you look closely, it's all like metals and recycled materials. So it's, the flavor of it is actually really cool. That post-apocalyptic, but like people are gone. And these robots, I believe, had been programmed to make these beautiful gardens, even like or they had found this information for like how to best set up a garden. And I think plants are gone as well. So they're just taking gems and non-biologic materials, and from the history of what they knew from what came before, trying to make these pretty gardens, which is very beautiful and evocative. Game Biologist says, humans and their food is weird. Who first came up with the idea of, check out that hoppy thing? Let me try licking it. Ditto for however they figured out chocolate. And for picking through civet poop to collect coffee beans. Yeah, I've read some fictional novels that are like fictionalized hunters and gatherers. Like, it used to be a genre that I was super into, and since we didn't exist back then, we can't know exactly how those people interacted with the world. But one of the cool things I remember was the medicine woman. So the people who were most knowledgeable about plants, their medicinal effects, and also their food effects. And you would come to a new region with new types of plants that you weren't familiar with and do a test for them, right? You know, you might like rub it on your tongue to to do tests, then maybe like eat a little piece of it, and that's scary, right? Like these things, not knowing how dangerous some of these things can be, but what else are you gonna do, right? Their survival was on such a knife's edge back when people were hunting and gathering things, and plus like climates change, certain plants, again, if you're moving, your tribe is spreading out, you don't necessarily have access to the things that you ate before. You got to do that, right? Like, and that's part of the reason that humans have been so successful, is like the trying of new foods. Like humans are omnivores. We eat a lot of different stuff. And that's been a thing throughout our history, is like trying things and trying to eat them. And also like being weird humans, some of the things we eat are for nutritional purposes. Like we would test the thing like, oh, is this going to be something that's going to keep me alive? But then a lot of the things we eat, like the chocolate, like the coffee beans, toads, we were also very interested in medicinal and also psychotropic substances, because turns out with consciousness and kind of knowing the future, knowing that you are going to continue to exist and that you're going to die someday, it's a very intense thing, right? Knowing that you are in pain right now and you might continue to be in pain. That's the sort of thing that drives people to experiment with these things, right? With the plants, like maybe we have enough food right now, but maybe that plant over there is going to help me connect with my ancestors, and that the psychological aspects of food can be just as important as the physiological aspects. Physiological. Senior Bob says, like the book The Clan of the Cave Bear. Yeah, exactly. That's the one that the whole series was one that I read, that I devoured. I don't even know. I think my mom was reading it, because I remember reading it at a pretty young age. And it was very central to kind of how my ideas started evolving over time, because it was kind of like pop history. And again, I took a lot of the stuff in there for granted. It's like, oh, this is what cave people were like, and we have some historical records to work from, but we have no video. We don't know for sure what things were like, but it's really cool to kind of think back at what these people's lives were like. Trying out plants to see if they're food. Drawn Onwards is a legacy game about spiritually connecting with your ancestors, and then you play their next relative in the chain. That's cool. It makes me think a little bit about ancestry, I think. Ancestry spelled with the word tree. Yeah, this is the one that Eric Lang did, right? So this one, I've seen a couple of games that are about family chains, about ancestry and traits, genetics, or like being passed down the family tree. But I like this game about spiritually connecting. I like the spiritual aspect of that. Spiritually connecting, and depending combine it with the toad licking, maybe, depending on which types of toads you're licking. Again, apologies to anyone who's looking for a normal board game design stream. Got the cold loopiness here, so, which I think is great. I think we're going to come up with some cool stuff here with the sort of out of itness. Just depending on substance consumption, maybe. Meanwhile, it just says, what if the mobile game Reigns wasn't about royalty holding their kingdom, but was about some poor schmuck lost in the wilderness trying to find food, water. Reigns. I haven't heard of that one. Oh, no, I have heard of this one. Yeah. Yeah, I like, oh my gosh, it's all kind of flooding back here for not only the Clan of the Cave Bear survival, there's a survival element to it too, but like Hatchet, and there's a few other books through when I was in school and still reading a lot of books that were about surviving in a harsh wilderness, and this idea of 100 to 1, 1,000 to 1 odds, and still being able to pull things together and make it, I think is a very cool, very evocative story. The toads will send me to my ancestors. Maybe you can acquire a trait or skill from an ancestor. I like that. Spiritually connecting with the ancestors. Ooh, generations, trait or skill. I think it's Hero Generations. Is a cool game, cool digital game. I think it was Hero Generations. Yeah. Let me take a... yeah, so this one, I wonder if we could do that Hero Generations, but in board game form. Because it is grid-based. So in Heroes Generations, you start out as a hero. Each time you move one space on the grid, you age a year. And you can only get to be, you go through the generations. So first you're kind of like young, not as experienced, and then you're in your like physical prime, and then you might have more knowledge or abilities, but you're not quite as strong, and then you're in old age. So your traits are actually changing over time as you progress, and this is every time you move a space on the board, and you're exploring too. You don't know what's out there, so it's kind of a very intense sort of experience of like crawling through the wilderness. And you know, I might be going towards a castle where I get lots of riches, but I might kind of die unknown. Die unknown and unsung. But the cool part about it is once you're starting to get to the end of your life, I forget what happens if you just like die, but the idea is you end up in a village and you try and woo someone to be your partner, and then you have a child, and that child has some of your traits from the parents, and then you play as that child and go out and explore, and so on and so forth. The rulebook says the end of it. It was all a dream, or was it? There's an old book about a soldier, Civil War, who gets shot and left for dead, but survives his wound and lives in the woods. Nice. I have to check that one out. I don't read as many books nowadays because it takes time. I'm spending all my time designing games. But I think there's a lot of cool stuff that you can get from this history and narrative. And especially if you're thinking, and we're talking more about just regular survival and food, like making it without being in a war situation. But if you look at this through the lens of also combat and survival from, if you look at the wars and people surviving in the wars, it's a whole different thing, and how much medicine has come and how much we rely on not just the safeties of food, but being able to go to the doctor and be fixed. Like Civil War, and I went to the Leeds Museum, like medical museum, a couple of years ago, looking at just the history of medicine. And even as recently, I think as 100 years ago, it was like, was it 100 years ago? No, maybe like 200 years ago. It was like weirdly recent. It was like, yeah, 1 in 4 women would die in childbirth. So there was a lot of stuff. And then in combat, you say like, if you play a video game or you watch modern movies, like, oh, they get shot a few times, it's not a big deal. But being shot in the Civil War, before medicine being out on the field, not having the same medicine and practices, hygiene practices to help keep people alive, like, yeah. Shot. That's doubly impressive for someone to be shot and to survive. Yeah, trying to figure out the name of it. Definitely interested to see that. Unless it's like just sad, like with the, and that's the thing too. I like reading the books of triumph over this situation. So it's like you're working, you're eating the food, like you've been injured and you're like coming back and getting better. But a lot of these stories, you're kind of eking out an existence, trying like day by day to survive. And you might not necessarily make it. For a lot of the books I used to read, like Hatchet and so on and so forth, that was the whole point of it. It's like this person went out, is like based on a true story or whatever, and they came back. But there's other real world stories, where people have gone out into the wilderness and tried to survive and didn't make it, which is sad. And that was something, too, that I've been going back and forth with for what to eat after the apocalypse. Survival? Question mark? So I had it at first that you would have a number of characters, and once your characters were gone, that was it, right? You wanted them to survive because you didn't want to be out of the game. So there was mechanically player elimination when your characters died. And I don't like being knocked out of a game and just having to sit there while other people play, unless it's just like a super fast game. You just like 2 minutes and then you get back into the game. So it was weird to me. It's like, why am I trying to design a game that has player elimination? It's like, well, I don't want the player elimination, but I do want people to feel the stakes of their characters are in danger. Survival and stakes. So investment in what you're doing as a player and connection with these characters that you're shepherding. So what I did mechanically for What to Eat After the Apocalypse is you basically had a never-ending supply of people. You'd have two main characters who you were playing as. And then if one of them died, the idea was you would have another person from the tribe. You'd like pass on your legacy to your children or so on and so forth. And hence always had people. So you're playing, again, through like a lineage as opposed to playing a specific character. And I think the direction I'm thinking now is there a way mechanically to have a character that you're investing in and then transition to another character. So still have the stakes, still care a lot about the person that you're playing as. And then, but still be able to continue to play after that character is gone. Still be able to play as a ghost, right? Gameball just asks, can eliminated players take on another role? Ghosts! And this is an interesting thing. Again, like trying to push the bounds of what a board game is and what it means to have characters that you're embodying. It's kind of coming up against a role-playing game, right? And you have this character who you are existing as. You think about how a game like Dungeons & Dragons handles it is usually if a character dies, if your character dies, you're able to come in with another character. Or unless people are specifically, unless you decide you don't want to play the game, people are trying to kick you out of the game, which I've never experienced that, and that would be, seems like it would be pretty shitty. But yeah, you, in a role-playing game, if it's an ongoing campaign game, your character, your person will come back embodying another character. And it makes me think too, like, what is the relationship? Between the characters who are playing. I'm thinking about What to Eat After the Apocalypse as a competitive game. Not necessarily to the extent that you're fighting over food. Like, I don't necessarily want it to be a combat game, but you know, you're working towards your own points scoring situation. But the idea from the beginning was that you're kind of traveling along this path together. You all have your own goals. You want to survive. Is the big thing, where it's a very dangerous landscape, and you know, it's fine if other people survive as well, but you're very focused on self-survival. But it could be cool if your characters are interacting more. Because there isn't really a lot of player interaction right now, except for with the conditions you can get and kind of infect other people. But if it was more focused back down to a character, and like you're saying, it was okay for characters to be eliminated, where you might come in as another character to the group. And that could synergize with the idea of a pilgrimage and these people going on this journey. as a group together, and you keep getting new people coming into the group, going towards this place together. Into group, making a journey together, helping or harming each other. You get more attached to your specific character. Maybe it could even be an RPG. There's an interesting dichotomy for this idea of survival and pilgrimage placed up against almost the silliness of rolling a dice to see if you get irradiated from eating this rat that you found on the ground. Which is interesting, you know, like, I love the old Fallout games. I could never beat them because it just takes so long. I love the flavor of it, and I think it has that dark humor to it where, you know, you have these very important goals, but everything in the environment is trying to kill you. Yeah, I guess that's really what I'm trying to reconcile now is I don't want it to just be goofy or just like, oh, you're rolling dice. And that's definitely where it's been pushed towards now. It's like, oh, I ate this plant and it's making me sick. So I don't want it to just be goofy, but it's hard to figure out how to reconcile those two things. Killed by radiation. Can they embody the radiation and affect how it spreads? I like that for an asymmetrical game. Like Vast, where you're playing as the cave. Game. Have a chance to play as the conditions, killing off the other players. Cindy Rob says, I would have a bunch of clones stockpiled. So you're just traveling with your convoy of your clones that come along, and when you die, you just like have another one. Isn't that how paranoia works? Is that the movie Paranoia? Or a game called Paranoia? They just have a bunch of clones? That's cool, I'll have to check that out. Other survivors equals alternate food sources. Okay, this was... Again, I'm trying to get the core loop of it before I started getting too much crazy stuff, but cannibalism? Question mark? That was a thing I had thought about a little bit and whether to put that in. Maybe someday. How very Donner Party of you. Oh. TTL. Paranoia. This is cool. This isn't one that I have looked at before. Oh, that's super cool. I'll have to look into that, the old dystopian thing. It's very interesting to me. I'll have to check that out. I love, like, I know people come and go from the Twitch stream and pop in from the chat and see my notebook here. It's just like, cannibalism. Welcome to my game design stream where we talk about cannibalism. If you are just joining us, we're talking about my game I'm working on called What to Eat After the Apocalypse and how to make it so people can continue to play and engage potentially after their characters have died in the game. RPG. Again, I don't know how much space there is for this. Like, it seems it's just taking a slice of the post-apocalyptic world, right? Where the your normal post-apocalyptic world, Mad Max or whatever, don't usually focus too much on food. Unless Waterworld. I think that's one with the plant is very central to the ongoing of the plot. And maybe that's why I like Waterworld. I really like Waterworld. This is where they are actually talking about more mundane survival, as opposed to just surviving against being attacked by the gassers or whatever in your world. Survival. So I wonder if there's space, not necessarily that this would end up being a role-playing game, but taking an exploratory route down the line, saying like, what if this was a role-playing game? What would the mechanics be of that? And it's a game where there is maybe kind of powered by the apocalypse style, where fighting is so dangerous and consequential. And you're traveling with this group of people and just coming upon these locations where there may or may not be food. And I don't even know if that would work, if that would be fun. You're just like, you come to this new location, you're going to, actions would be searching for food, and then eating the food, and some light mechanics for whether that food was poisoned or irradiated or not. Just like chugging the can of beans. Bean botulism. And then the effects may not be food. Searching for food. Eating the food. Checking the conditions you would get from that. Conditions. Then the effects on you and the rest of the group. Of dealing with these conditions. So if someone gets irradiated and mutated, and I like a little like speculative fiction fantasy aspect to it. Like one of the conditions I have now, if you get irradiated, is it doesn't cure, it like kills all the disease in your body, but you get hungry twice as fast. So you become this like raging food eating monster. So, and that's an interesting thing mechanically to think about game design. I think a lot of designers, especially if you have a preferred type of game, or if you just see a vision for your game going forward, it's like, this is going to be a board game, it's going to be mechanical. I think it can be a good practice to look at what else that might be in the game sphere, you know, whether it can be, like I started out and this was going to be a board game with dice rolling and we're going to count up our points. You know, what if this becomes a role-playing game where the flavor and the narrative of this is really what I want to focus on? And how can I capture that feeling? Or a storytelling game that's kind of half and half between role-playing game and tabletop game. And going even farther beyond that, would this make more sense as a digital game or as a story, you know, interactive fiction? Like there's playing around with an idea and seeing where best you can go with the idea. And sometimes it's not going to be what you originally thought about or hoped for. Sometimes the way to move forward is to move backwards. Okay. Well, that was interesting. I hope this stream was fun for people. My voice is starting to give out a little bit, so I think I'm going to pop off a little bit early today. Hopefully be in fine form next week, or else try and squeeze in another stream. I want to do more of these design streams, and it's always really fun and helpful connecting with everyone. So I really appreciate everyone tuning in. I'm still trying to figure out what to eat after the apocalypse is. It's definitely a very fascinating topic for me. I think being able to talk about it with y'all and think about it and jam a little bit is going to turn into something interesting and weird, which I'm excited about. As always, if you have any more thoughts about these topics, you can talk to me on Twitter. I'm at Emma Larkins. I stream board game design every Tuesday and some casual magic game shenanigans on Fridays. You can follow or subscribe the channel. Always happy to see your shining avatars in the chat, and hopefully feel a little bit better and do some more focused game design on next week's stream. For the time being, I'll catch you later and see you around the table. Bye, friends. Time for no more naps. Yeah, just naps. Bye.